Welcome, everyone, and hello, and welcome to the ICA's Book Talk. My name is Cindy Bartz, and I'm a member of the ICA's Health and Wellness Committee. And today I am interviewing Dr. Amy Dunker, the author of Meditations for Musicians. Dr. Amy is a professor of music at Clarke University, where she teaches music theory, composition, and trumpet. Amy has a doctorate of music in composition from the University of Missouri, Kansas City Conservatory of Music, a master's in composition from Butler University, as well as a master's in trumpet performance from the University of South Dakota, and she earned her bachelor's in music education from Morningside College. She frequently gives master classes and performances throughout the U.S. as well as internationally, and Amy's compositions have been performed worldwide. It is a pleasure to have Amy as our guest today. Thank you, Amy, for taking the time to discuss your book, Meditations for Musicians.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's really an honor.
Yeah. Well, I'm very excited. I got your book about a month and a half ago, and I really like the short little meditations. They're really nice. For those of you that are viewing today, we are live streaming this interview, and if you have questions, you can certainly write them in the chat box, and then at the end of the formal interview, if there's any questions that come in, we can discuss those. So, with that, let's get started. So, again, welcome, Amy. It's so great to be able to discuss your book. And I'm wondering, first off, what inspired you to write Meditations for Musicians?
My students and former students are the ones that encouraged me to write it. They're like, "Oh, you should write some of these things you say to us all the time. You should write them down." So I was on a sabbatical, and that was a good time to do it. And it was helpful for me too, because it's kind of a look back throughout all the things that I did right and wrong over the years as well.
Yeah. So, as an author, what is your hope and the intention musicians will or can achieve by incorporating meditation practices from your book?
Well, my goal is to really help people stay centered. It's a really tough career because so much of it is, you can practice like crazy and still not get the gig. And there's always this competitive aspect, there's always this perfectionism aspect, and it can really drive people over the edge. And there's also a lot of what you want to call the games of music, the who's who do you know, gender, race, and whatnot issues that I went through, at least when I was going through school. So there's a lot of all these kind of things that mesh together that can really mess up your head. And it's like, I wanted them to be able to put in their case, open the books, I want to scream, I want to throw something, open the book and find something that'll say, yeah, I need to think this way.
Yeah, and this past year in our health and wellness committee, one of the things that we really focused on was anxiety, stress that musicians have and experience. And you're absolutely right. I mean, it can be so competitive. And then the other thing, too, is the performance anxiety. And for so many years, it was, hushed. We didn't talk about that, especially if we were professionals. And yet, I think there's probably not anyone on the face of this earth that hasn't, at least at one time, had that performance anxiety. And I know by meditating and finding techniques like this can really help to get a better mindset around the whole, performance and the competitiveness that can sometimes creep into our daily life as a musician.
I actually started with, some of the older books like Soprano on Her Head and whatnot, but I actually got into some of the sports books because they were kind of the first ones to acknowledge at that really top professional level the anxiety and whatnot that goes into it, and it left out all of the science garble to prove you're an academic. It was just, stories and right to the point of what you want to do instead of having to read through half of the book to find out all the psychology and chemistry and whatnot. And so I started there, and usually those books disappear. So they graduate. So I buy them every couple of years. But that's how I started with that kind of, what can I do with this? I've been carrying this. I had a teacher that was not a good match for me. And, I carried that for many, many years.
Yeah. Oh man, a teacher can make all the difference in the world, whether it's, a good teacher or a bad teacher. Yeah. I know for me too, I've had mostly good teachers. I really haven't, fortunately, had very many bad teachers. But in my career, I've had bad bosses, right? And the same thing, you kind of write all those things down in your head and go, I'm not going to be like that, so you kind of have to turn that around. Yeah.
Especially when you're young, a graduate student, undergraduate, and you're so vulnerable to this person because they have their career in their hands, and you so want to please and do well. And if you have someone that's abusive in any way
Right.
and not encouraging, it can cause the end of your career right there, or it can
Yeah.
cause years and years of damage.
Yes. Yeah. Trauma, all kinds of different things. Yeah, it really can. Um, can I ask, as far as you personally, do you practice meditation? I'm assuming you do, but don't want to assume anything. So, like how long have you meditated, and what kind of got you started?
Well, I had one of those teachers,
Yes.
almost went completely over the edge. And that's
Mm,
when I started exploring this area. And that would have been probably more than 30 years ago now. But that's when I started exploring this. And I do some meditation almost every day. I have a few short ones just to focus me on what I want to do that can just be, sit there for a couple of minutes and say, you know, these kind of chants and get refocused. And then I have longer ones for when there's more stuff to sort out and deal with.
yeah. Well, there's, obviously so many different ways to meditate. There's so many different techniques. One of the things that I really liked about your book is that, and I'm a yogi as well. I do meditate pretty much every day and, do yoga and some breath work and that sort of thing. But what I really liked about your book is that, and I would say that a lot of them are mantras, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Like I think the first one, if I remember correctly, is it's only two words. Love is greater than fear, right? And you could meditate on that for a couple minutes just before you practice.
Mhm.
I think that one is a really good one, especially if you have any type of performance anxiety. And it's not necessarily performing on stage, it could be for a music lesson, it could be for a master class, it could be, many different things.
Or even when
So
somebody walks down the hallway of the practice row, and some students can get really, they're watching me, you know.
yeah, they're listening to me in the next room or whatever. Yeah. So I really like that about the book, that it's very easy to use, right? And not just, like I said, when you're necessarily performing live, in front of, you know a live audience, but it could be in a practice room. Yeah. Do you have any type of specific techniques to the type of meditation you do?
We
Have you had any like training in it or anything like that?
only having read books, so I'm a complete, really amateur, and the experience of teaching now for a very long time and playing for a very long time. And so I go with what works for my students and what works for me. So oftentimes, if I have a stressed class, 'cause I also teach ear training,
Mm.
and oftentimes I will have them just stop before the exam, breathe in and out, and empty their mind. Just don't think about it. Just breathe before we even begin the exam, just to put them in that space where they can now focus on what they're doing rather than all the other things that are going on. I also sometimes have my trumpet players stretch with their instruments before when they come in, If they've just come from a class that didn't go well or a test or whatnot, and they're stressed out, we start the lesson with some stretching. Unfortunately, the trumpet is the exact right weight to do, over the head. It's
Oh
just
yeah,
the
yeah.
bend and then doing the bend down and even the one arm things. And by the time they get done with that, and then we start maybe a long tone warm up, they're into the lesson and focused in out of whatever happened before.
Yeah, well, going back to the breath is so important, and there's definitely different techniques
Mhm.
out there that are specific for the breath, and it's a really, really, let's face it, it's a really great way to focus
Mhm.
your attention is if you focus your attention on the breath.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I really like that stretch thing. We could do that with the clarinet too, right? Yeah.
And it takes all that stiffness out and gets them ready to breathe properly. Because if they're all, you can't breathe properly, no matter how many times I instruct them to do this or that or the other thing. And so it gets
Yeah.
them ready. I don't do it every lesson, but when I notice that they're really stressed, we definitely do that.
Yeah, there's a group a community group band that I'm in, and one of the things that we started doing actually before we even warm up, everybody sits, everybody gets quiet when the conductor gets up there, and the first thing that he does is he has everybody actually close their eyes, and we take 3 slow long breaths in, and then exhale. Inhale, exhale. We do that 3 times, and it's amazing. Our practice is in the evenings, and most of us have other jobs, right?
Yep.
Because it's a community group, right? And getting all of the stuff that was in our mind all day from our other job that we had, and then the traffic of getting there, putting the instrument, and everything together. And man, the energy in the room like totally changes in just a matter of like less than a minute, right? So, yeah, the breath is so important.
It's
And as a
making,
wind instrument, come on, right?
it also makes the space your own. And when you do it with the stretches with the instrument, it also makes the instrument part of you. As you're moving and that instrument is moving with you. And so it kind of sets your room and where you're going to be.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So, as a professor, then it sounds like you introduce this sometimes in classes or maybe master classes and things, but any other type of like techniques that you give your students, or how do you introduce this to your students so that they don't think, oh, here's a really wacko teacher with this woo woo thing going on?
We talk about stress. I mean, I'll walk in and say, boy, you guys look really stressed today. It's a small school. We have small classes. We're also a Catholic school, so I don't have to worry about the religion stuff that people might, and if they want to participate, they can. And if they don't want to, they don't have to. So it's just, okay, but first we're just going to breathe. Okay, the first thing I want you to do is breathe. All right, relax. The test is over. Now we're here, that kind of thing. Sometimes I'll just start with trying to make them laugh. I had one class where I was doing ear training, and the class was so uptight. Those girls that were in this class still remember it. They call it the laughing class. They said that was the best ear training class we ever had,
Aw.
because I would do something, as soon as something quirky, on the piano we're singing, as soon as something quirky, I'd, make some comment or some face, and we'd all start laughing, and we'd go back and do that kind of stuff. Because sometimes you just, you walk in with those best laid lesson plans, but you have to look around with the people you're teaching and say, okay, this is getting through all of this isn't the important thing that they need today. If we get
Yes.
some of it, great. But they won't get anything if I just push through.
Yeah, 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 that's awesome. Okay. Do you have any advice for musicians who maybe are struggling to stay consistent with, say, a meditation practice? What, maybe some. I think, especially at the beginning of the year, somebody is trying to, maybe change a few things in their life. They're like, I'm going to meditate every single day, and then, that works for 2 or 3 days, and then you kind of fall out the wagon sometimes. So I'm just wondering if you have any advice for folks that are kind of struggling with that consistency of having a practice.
I tell them find something small, short, and consistent, even if it's, you're changing your tonguing, or let's say you're learning, whatever it is. Just say it over and over again tell your brain in a positive mode what you want the result to be. Don't say I'm not going to, because your brain doesn't understand negatives. It's, oh, it wants me to not play a B flat there. Okay. I'll play a B flat there.
Yeah, yeah.
So, to state which, just when you're practicing and you make a mistake, state it out loud in a positive. I am going to play a B flat in that passage. And they play the passage and they look at me like, it worked. Yes, you're telling your brain what you want it to do. Don't tell it what you don't want it to do. That's never going to work, because then it's going to have to guess. Tell it exactly what you want to do outside and verbally, like you're the teacher. And 99% of the time, it comes out correctly. If it doesn't, start over again, do it again, slow it down, try it again.
Yeah.
Say it out loud.
Yeah. And then also, I'm sure all of us as musicians at one point had maybe like a performance that didn't go the way that we wanted it to. We got a little bit too stressed, or we had that difficult practice session where we just want to, beat ourselves up. I'm no good, all of that. So, again, how do you, for your students that maybe had a stressful performance or some sort of a difficult practice session, how do you help them to recover from that so that they do have that more positive frame of mind going forward?
Well, we sit down with a candy bar or something.
Chocolate helps, right?
I've even had students walking the hall and are a music major. I get to knock on my door. I know I'm not a music major. Can I have a piece of candy?
Aww.
There. Take 2 out of petty cash, But then we sit down and say, okay, what was positive? What worked? Well, nothing worked. No. Something worked. Did you put your trumpet together correctly? Well, yeah. Okay, that worked. Did you trip when you walked out? Well, no. Okay, that worked. Did you bow? Yeah. Did they clap? Yeah. Okay. Did you play, and I purposely pick things that I know they did correctly. So there's a lot of things you did correctly. So you have to honor those. So the things that didn't go as well as you wanted, let's go back to the practice room. Okay, let's make a list of those. And how are we going to work on those to make them better for the next performance? What was the problem that happened? Well, I couldn't play that passage fast enough. Okay, so that just means that passage needs to be gone over slowly and work for speed with a metronome. And we go through all those kind of things. It's like, I try to teach them that everything is a learning experience.
Yeah.
And I have a secret video that I love to play. It's a really famous trumpet player playing a John Williams piece. He's soloing with John Williams conducting, and has a moment where it just all over the place. And he regains it right. I mean, it was a very noticeable mistake. Of course, he got right back on. And I said, okay, if this guy can make that mistake with John Williams conducting, I can be human too. And of course, I heard the subsequent performance, and of course, he did not make that mistake. I show that to my students. Okay, here's the next night's performance. He didn't make that mistake, did he?
Yeah.
He overcame that performance.
Right. Well, getting back to the sports folks, there is this alignment that is very similar, especially when we're performing as musicians, and the fact that you got one shot. Right. Mm-hmm. And if you're in the Olympics, you got one shot. Mm-hmm. Right. And we're not perfect, and we all want to be. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah.
And we're small. Like I explained to the athletes that take my gen ed class, we are small muscle athletes. You are big muscle athletes. It's the same thing with the same problems. It's just a different muscle group.
Yeah, that's so true. And when you get stressed out, again, it doesn't necessarily, it could be in a practice room, it could be, wherever. Let's face it, then the sympathetic, not the parasympathetic, but the sympathetic nervous system takes over. And when that takes over, I mean, there's just so many physical things that can happen. And then, of course, most of us are thinking about those things instead of, what we should be playing or doing. Whether it's your heart is faster, or your body got very cold or very
Mhm.
hot and you're sweating, and maybe you're, trembling, and there's just like so many physical things that can happen, to focus our mind on that instead of the music. Yeah.
And one of the meditations is, what does the music need? And if you get into that position where everything's going, it's like, what does the music need? What am I trying to communicate? What did the composer try to communicate to me that I'm trying to communicate to the audience? And if you
Yes.
start focusing on that, it gets rid of all that stuff. You still may have a heart rate at, something your doctor like scream at you for, but it gets you focused on the right thing instead of the wrong thing.
Yeah, yeah. Why am I here? What
Mhm.
message do I, this is a great platform to, share what it is that really music is all about, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
it's also,
That's,
invent your career. When I was in school, the thing was, you had two tracks. You were either the jazz trumpet player track or you were the symphony orchestra track. And everybody was
mhm.
learning all the excerpts and all that stuff. And, we all know what's happened to the symphony orchestra, how many jobs are out there. And right now, even how many jobs are in higher ed right there, right now. It's like, so my focus with my students is invent your career. Okay, you're taking my composition class and you're a guitar major. So how do you, and you like composing, so how do you put that together into a career that is not just playing the guitar, but it's the composing and arranging component. It's all these things that make you unique rather than trying to be the widget that wins the symphony orchestra audition or whatever is down the road. Like, you can do that if you want to, but know the risks of doing that, know the difficulties of doing that. And yes, you will be trained for that, but you're also going to look at your whole package of who you are and all your skills, and we're going to bundle them. So when you go out, you have lots of tracks for making money. And during COVID, when a lot of things were shutting down, my guys were still making money. I have a guy that was writing film music and film shut down. Well, I convinced him he needed to get the master's degree. So he was substitute teaching. He was teaching in some of the colleges, supporting his family that way. I mean, so they all understand that multiple streams of income is a great thing for an artist these days.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. I wish I would have had you as a professor. Because, I had this like one track and I put myself in this box, of like music education. So if I don't get a full-time music ed job, I'm screwed. I have to do something else, right? And
What do I do if it doesn't work out?
exactly. And it didn't. Right?
Music
Yeah.
is a hard track, especially these days. Those guys that are out there every day teaching, God bless them, because it is very difficult.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, which, leads me to kind of the next question, which you kind of already answered was, meditation impacting our lives in different aspects other than music, right? Like your career, which might be music, or it might be that you do follow a different track, or maybe it's a little bit of both, and in inventing yourself. But, with, just traffic when we're coming and going from work, and then if we do decide to, have some other career, and the stress that can be caused from that. And then, of course, there's all the relationships that we have, friends and, intimate relationships and family.
I tell students, if there's something you can see yourself doing other than music, do it. You can still do music. We have an alumni of Clarke that's actually an editor for the newspaper. She still sings opera in Madison, and she's written for various opera magazines and whatnot, but her primary career is being editor of the Dubuque Telegraph Herald.
Yeah, yeah, that's cool. That's very
She's done
cool.
fantastic things for the arts in the community by being in that position.
Yeah, yeah. I have a colleague too for undergrad. She in undergrad she worked in the music library. Well, then after she got out, and she's a fantastic musician, fantastic, and she didn't, earn her performance degree, but she actually decided to go into librarian,
Mhm.
right? And she does that to this day. And it's really kind of interesting how that ventured off. But she just really, really loved that even more so. And she still performs and does that type of thing, but it's not her full time
And
gig.
it's so healthy to have that balance. I had emergency surgery over New Year's Eve. So
Mm.
the surgeon comes in and says, "You won't remember me. I don't expect you to remember me, but I was a student of yours." What do you say? What grade did you get? Um, Fantastic surgeon, wonderful person, and we talked about, various, yeah, I'd really like to get back into playing again. I played through medical school, but residency, I couldn't do that. And I've been a few, I'd like to get back into playing again because it's just such a balance of what's going on. And man saved my life. So, music must have done some great things for him.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of folks that once they get in their 50s, 60s, and beyond, maybe they were even in just a high school band, right? But they have more time, maybe they're retired or semi retired, and they're like, I'm going to take out my instrument again. Or maybe they have that music degree of some sort, but then they decided to move on to a different career. And then again, because they're semi-retired or retired, they come out of that. And I know some musicians that they literally had not played for like 30, 35 years, right? And then they got back into it, like kind of their second second phase, and they love it. I think too, that second phase, so to speak, there's not as much competition, right? Because you're not like, oh, I need to get these gigs, or I need to earn this spot in this symphony, or there's nothing like that. They're in a community band, but the social aspect of it is really good for them. It gives them something to do. It actually, from a physical standpoint, is really good for breath, for focus. So there's so many things that can be done, from that aspect as well.
And a lot of these guys are really fantastic players. And this guy was a great player as a kid. You'd be surprised how many medical schools have music ensembles. Like the University of Iowa has a medical school jazz ensemble.
Wow.
University of Kansas in the day had an orchestra. That everybody from the hospital, nurses, doctors, whatnot would play in. So you'd be surprised how many of those kind of ensembles are out there where these people went into a very stressful profession like surgeon.
Hmm.
Talk about perfectionism. I mean, we miss a note, okay, we get all upset, but he misses a note, somebody's in trouble.
Yeah, yeah,
But
exactly.
our musicians, and it's that balance for them of being able to go back and forth between and it's their meditation, really. The whole music performance is their meditation.
Yeah, yeah. In the one community band that I'm in, the man that sits right next to me, he's only been playing clarinet for 3 years, and he's a retired surgeon. So it's kind of interesting. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Um, so, what has been maybe the response from other musicians or readers who have applied some of the meditations from your book? Have you, um, you know, heard from many of the readers, or maybe you give your students your book? So I'm just wondering, what the reaction is, and maybe some of the comments that they have given you, or stories, maybe.
I've heard from people who keep it in their instrument case. They, pull it out when they get frustrated and look at it, which is exactly what it's for. I've had teachers that gift them to their students for Christmas, graduation, whatnot, because it's just really directed at grounding you in a very volatile career. And so I've had, people like some of them especially, they kind of see my little truth and joke in that, every once in a while I say, go practice.
Yes.
Because sometimes we just ruminate so much that we're not doing what we really need to do to get where we want to go. Why am I not reading my guy? I can't get to my goals. Why, talking to all our friends, well, we can't get to our goals. We're not getting into the practice room.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. That's
That
so
can be a fun
good.
trap.
Yeah. I got the digital copy, but now I'm thinking, oh, maybe I do want to get the actual physical book. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's interesting. That's really cool. I didn't think about it that way, but I do like the one go practice.
I've seen so many students that get so upset they're not winning the competition and whatnot, but they're really not spending the time in the practice room itself doing what they need to do to win the competition.
Yeah. Yeah, the trumpet, is a little easier to put together. The clarinet takes so long to put together. Oh. sometimes sometimes I'm like, oh, I really want to practice, but man, I have to put my clarinet together, which is like really silly, right? Um,
I have the same problem. I mean, I've worn many hats. I've been department chair. I teach theory and composition and trumpet and ear training and all, I'm pulled in a lot of directions.
yeah.
Um, if I don't keep my trumpet out on a stand,
Mm,
say, hey, hey, if I put it in the box, it'll stay in the box. But if I put it out on the stand and I see it every day, so I tell students, put it out on the stand in your room,
yeah. Yeah.
so you see it. We're small enough, we have practice rooms, it's like, pick a practice room and call it yours and put it out on the stage if you have to. Put a sign on your mirror or whatever you have to do that's there and it's real, because when you get in life and you're dealing with, especially when you're department chair, 10,000 things coming at you. And as soon as you think you're ready to do something, knock, knock, knock.
Yeah.
But when
Yeah.
it's there, I can just go, time. So that's my little secret. If you see it in the box, it's Amy's been a bad girl.
Uh, well, is there anything that you would like to add to the discussion as far as, you know, other experiences or stories from some of your students or anything like that?
Well, the cool thing is some of my students have gone on now to write their own books. I mean,
Right.
Marcus DeJesus has one that's out on Amazon now. It's called Between the Frets, and he talks about preparing, practice being how to practice, how to be a professional, all these kind of things. And so I'm so proud of him that he's now taking what he's learned over these years and has put it into, because we all have different perspectives. And I tell my students, gather lots of perspectives and take from what you need. That's how you become a fine whatever you want to be. You don't just take one person, I'm going to study their particular thing and I'm going to be a student of blah, blah, because that's going to restrict you way too much.
Right.
Find all these things. Read books by other artists. If you're a clarinet player, read trumpet player books, read guitar player books, read singer books. There's all kinds of good information in them that you can get and bring back to the instrument. And then that makes you the unique you, because you've added something from the outside that brings something new to what you're doing.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. And I know your book is available on Amazon. Is there any other places that have your book, or probably Amazon's the best? Or
Yeah, I have a website, Batuta Press. It's available on that.
mm,
Um,
okay.
Baton. I also have a book for people who are teaching public schools, meditations for teachers. Because
Oh, cool.
I was that kid that didn't necessarily come from the best of family situations. So sometimes when you get so frustrated with a kid, you open up and remind you that this kid may be the adult in their family. I mean, it's that
Yeah.
stunning stopper when you're so frustrated with this. Oh, yeah, that could be true. Or,
Yeah, I think I hope most teachers, whether it's elementary, primary, all the way up through high school and college as well, but mostly in primary and high school. Um, I think most teachers realize that they are a mentor, and man, it can make all the difference in the world. I know growing up, I my music teacher was such an incredible teacher and such an incredible mentor.
Mhm.
Um, and if I wouldn't have had her as a role model, you know, I'm sure it would have turned out okay anyway. I hope so. But man, she had such a huge, huge impact in my life. And
And
I saw her a couple of years ago, and I'm like, I think of you so often, and she was like, I think of you too, and I was like, oh really? Yeah, yeah,
one time when one of the teachers picked me up and asked me if things were going okay, and I said, of course, yes, even though it was very difficult family. And, I never thanked him for it, and he has passed. So, and there's two teachers that I dedicated this book to. Because it's also to help you stop when you're so frustrated in such a moment that you can stop and go, oh yeah. For the teachers one, it's almost like a, boom, change thought, boom, change thought. I've heard a lot of good things from teachers about that it's great for those moments when things aren't so great.
Yeah, yeah. Getting back to the performance anxiety, one of the things that happened to me, I was in seventh grade, so you're this teenager, and it was solo and ensemble, and we always had a practice run. So we had one night in which everybody had the opportunity to play for their family and friends and that sort of thing. And it was the first time that I ever had to do a solo. And I got up there and I buckled my knees and was a little stressed out and I fainted. And so as a 12-year-old waking up in front of your family and friends after fainting, I just felt, oh my gosh, so just so embarrassed, right? And it was my music teacher that went, because I went in the bathroom and I was crying and everything. She came in there and she gave me a really nice pep talk, and she's like, you have to go back out there and do it, because if you don't, you'll it's like getting back on the horse, right? So again, those teachers can make such a difference in our lives. So that's really cool that you have another book just for teachers. I like that.
And I'm hoping the Meditations for Musicians gives them that mentor in that moment when they don't have a mentor in the practice room. It says, wait, calm down. It's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Where are you going next? What are you about? So I'm kind of hoping it's a mentor in the practice room that can say, well, wait, and if you don't have that mentor, fine. I spent, after I left the professor that was abusive, I spent 20 years with a Vulcan death grip on my trumpet trying to,
Oh.
I went to Butler University, and I was going to quit trumpet completely. And the composition professor said, well, they're playing Rite of Spring. Why don't you audition for the orchestra anyhow? So, okay, I can audition for an extra part. Okay. And so I auditioned, and I get this call from the conductor that night. He said, well, I see you just want to, help out with the orchestra. I'd like you to be principal trumpet. Do you want to be principal trumpet? No. No. Who the hell says that, right?
Wow.
We're still friends today. We are the best of friends today. But, that was like, oh, somebody actually thinks I play well. What?
Wow.
He's supposed to be this like world famous conductor, and he actually thinks I play well. What? What's
Yeah.
wrong with you? Yeah,
That's
so
awesome.
well, it's putting that in perspective too. When you have, or a master class, and you have somebody that's just, on you, and you think, oh, this great person thinks I'm terrible. It's like, you also have to look at the perspective from that person's, oftentimes, and there's one in the book, sometimes it's their issue, not your issue.
Right.
And you have to sort that out. Take what you need to fix and fix, but also sort out what's really their issue and let it go.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think as music teachers, the music teacher profession has changed quite a bit in the last like 20 years because of anxiety and stress and competition and all of that. I know, dating myself, but back in the 70s, if you went to a rehearsal and maybe, your section, was a little messy or whatever, it's like one by one, and
Mhm.
chairs would sometimes
Yep.
get switched, and
Uh-huh.
it was just like so stressful. And I don't think that there's very many band directors or that type of teaching that's going on, thank God, anymore. It's much more understanding, I would hope. And
Also,
because
back in that day, in the trumpet section, some of those, traditionally male ensembles, and I felt like I had to play twice as good as any guy to be considered half the player.
yeah.
And that's just, I don't blame every man out there and all that kind of stuff, but that, and unfortunately I'm seeing a lot of that starting to filter back into society. It hasn't completely gone away, but it got better. But I'm seeing some of that kind of stuff coming back, and it's just really frightening. It's just, not where it needs to go. We don't need to give people anxiety. We need to lift them up.
Yeah, exactly.
Just
Exactly.
lift them up.
Yeah.
Wait till they fly and then help them fly.
Exactly. So, we do have a few people online, and I don't see any chat questions that came in, but does anybody have any questions? No?
I have a couple newer books I'd recommend.
Wow, okay.
Um, Kara Cinnamon, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, Achieving Peak Performance in Music. Excellent book. And Vanessa Cornett, The Mindful Musician. They're well
Mm,
researched, have lots of good ideas about how to deal with meditation and mindfulness and all those kind of things. So if you want something that's a little more in-depth with more reading to it with some exercises, those are great books to go to. If you just need something in the practice room to, put you back on the path when you're kind of sliding on the ice. That's a very northern term, isn't it? Sliding on the ice. Um, my book is good for that because it's short and, here's a sentence, think about it.
yeah, 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 yeah. So, yeah, so for those folks that do not, they haven't read your book or haven't seen your meditations for musicians, it's not guided meditations. They're more like mantras. Like, for instance, go practice. That's the meditation. Go practice.
Yeah.
Love is greater than fear. There's these mantras that you focus on to get you back on track.
Or I'll just read a couple. Don't underestimate yourself. Don't overestimate yourself. We have a problem with that in music too. Be honest with yourself, even if it hurts a little.
Yeah.
Um, or eventually it will be your turn. Go practice. For that moment you lose the audition, every part, every role is important. Or here's one that I try to encourage my students when they're afraid to, should I apply for this? You can always say no, but you can't always apply, quote, audition for a particular job. Go for it.
Yeah, yeah. What
You know,
was the
it's the,
one before that that do you remember what it was
um, in the book that I just read.
that you just read?
Oh, don't overestimate yourself. Don't underestimate yourself. Be honest with yourself, even if it hurts.
Yeah, 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 yeah. There was
Because
one in between that, and it brought up a memory for me because I forget now which one it was, but it brought back the memory because when I was a freshman in college, you have your auditions and all of that, and then there's all these bands, and you don't want to be in the best band, right? The wind ensemble, and I made the wind ensemble, but I was last chair, and I didn't realize as a freshman that was actually really good. All I was thinking about is I got last chair, and I was like beating myself up. And then we went to the first rehearsal, and the director was like, we have a lot of freshmen in here, which is actually pretty amazing. And so then I realized, oh, maybe I'm not as bad as I thought, and again, we have that mindset sometimes, that we're not very good, or we have a certain expectation. And one thing that I've learned through the years is there's always going to be people that are not as good as you, but there's always going to be people that are way better than you. you know, there's not very many musicians that can say I am the best in the whole world.
well, even, I would say when I say best musicians, I would say, oh, this person is probably one of the top 5 or 10 trumpet players or clarinet players, because when you get to that level, there's just so many.
Yeah.
And that's when you're also inventing your career. This person is the best trumpet player I've ever heard double tongue, but this person's got, oh, what a sound. There's
Yes.
those fine ones. Just be the best you can be and invent your career. Find the things that you're good at and the things you can contribute.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I do think as far as like professional musicians that are soloists and that sort of thing, most I know in the clarinet world it's probably the same, in the trumpet as well, but it just seems like all of those that are at such a high level, they really have a certain uniqueness.
Mhm.
So you're absolutely right. It's like the top 5 or the top 10. and they all have a certain aspect that is so unique to them, and it's not necessarily their tone, their technique. It might be something else as well.
And
And
there's this layer of luck and opportunity and doors and ceilings and windows that we go through that, you know, every time I go to a conference, I hear a composition by somebody. It's like, why haven't I heard of them? They're fantastic.
I know,
You know,
yeah,
so it's also dealing with that. You can be a fantastic, phenomenal player that nobody knows about,
right,
or a
right,
fantastic, phenomenal composer that nobody's heard about,
yes,
because
yes,
it's the propaganda and the connections and the who you know, what you know, and how much, you know, you might be a late bloomer. You might have a lot to overcome from your past that you've got to go into the future, whether it's training that you didn't really get to take any private lessons or whatnot, but you've really had this passion. You're going to have a little longer to get where they're, and sometimes, you know, that
yeah,
doesn't get recognized that they're a great performer, but they weren't that great performer when they were 22.
right, right. And as far as our audience as well, I would really recommend, go out to YouTube and search for Dr. Amy Drucker, because you have some amazing compositions. And I think before we went live and was recording, I said, I took some time to go out there and look you up, and I listened to some of your compositions, and they're beautiful, absolutely gorgeous pieces. So yeah, take the time to listen to some of those. Yeah.
Thank you. And you know, write your own. It's not just left to the composers to compose and the trumpet players to play trumpet and the clarinets to play clarinet. If you've got a passion for doing it, do it. Be gentle with yourself because you're a fifth grader in composition. Write a few things. You know, no, you're not going to write the next Mozart clarinet concerto the first time out. Maybe, but you know, and that's great. But you know, just start doing it and
Yeah.
talk to nice, gentle people who will give you ideas and suggestions and laud what your gift.
Yeah, there's so many composers out there, and I think so many of them are really great mentors.
Mhm.
One of the things that I was involved in for many years, actually about 20 years, was the church that I was going to at the time. When I started going to this church, they found out that I had a music degree, and they're like, "Oh, we have these handbells that have not been played in like years. Would you be interested?" I'm like, okay, I've never done handbells before. I'm a clarinet player, but I said, hey, I'll give it a shot. And I started really, really liking it. And we had like 3 octaves, so it was, a pretty nice sized group. And then I did, after a couple of years, I'd come across, like a tune that I really liked, and I'm like, you know what, this would really sound good with bells. And so I would arrange it for us, and it was actually really fun to do. Um, so yeah, if you've got that creative energy, certainly go for it. And you're not going to be the, the next
And if you're
Mozart.
thinking, yeah, but if you're thinking somebody should write a book about this, maybe that somebody is you. Just because you
Yeah,
haven't written a book, you don't have your PhD, blah, blah, it doesn't matter. You've got experiences and things to share. It's how I end my gen ed classes all the time. I say to them, each and every one of you has been given a special gift. It's your job to find out what that is and how you're going to share it with the world.
yeah,
And the whole class
beautiful,
goes,
beautiful.
um, and most of these kids that were taking this class were athletes and various, there were no, you know, and they were just like, oh, really? Yeah, you have a gift. You just have to figure out what it is and share it.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
right people will come along to help you with it if you just go out there and if they don't want to help you with it, you know, you send it to famous XY, forget them. Go to the next person. That's on them.
Yeah. Well, that's a beautiful place to stop, I think, right there. That is a beautiful thought, because we're all unique. We
Mhm.
all have very specific gifts. There's no one else that literally has ever lived on this earth that's exactly like us, with our skill sets and our knowledge and experiences that make us who we are. So
And the
yeah.
internet is cool. It's a mouthpiece for everyone, for good and for bad, but use it for good. You've got something to share, share it.
Yeah. And man, I mean, again, aging myself, but boy, the resources we have today, are just so unlimited. They really, really are. I mean, growing up, just to get a recording of something was a big deal. It was a big deal, and now it's like on our phone, on our PC, we
Getting our students to understand that is difficult to appreciate it. It's like, oh yeah, whatever, I can do whatever. It's like, no, do you have any idea how cool this is? What you have to do is go looking for. Oftentimes they don't go looking for it. They just turn on the TikTok or whatever. It's like, no, go looking. There's a incredible world out there that you have access right here that,
yeah.
wasn't even in my imagination when I was their age. Because
Oh, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Well, thank you again. This is so informative. I'm so glad that we had the opportunity to talk and discuss your book and discuss some of the different techniques and ways that you've helped your students and have helped, I'm sure, many, many, many people. So thanks again.
and thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, yeah. So, for those listening, my hope is that the book and this discussion can help you as a musician, and I truly believe that meditation is such a powerful technique for relieving stress and anxiety and all these things that happen in our life, not just as musicians, but in our personal lives and our relationships as well. So, again, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you.